Welcome to Moonlit Ink BL. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Reaper Who Stayed Too Long. Death was usually quiet. Kim Han-sol preferred it that way. He stood at the edge of a narrow alley in Seoul, the city breathing around him, neon signs flickering, rainwater gathering in shallow puddles, the distant hum of traffic bleeding into the night. To human eyes, he was just another tall man in a dark coat, hands tucked into his pockets, expression unreadable. Ordinary. Forgettable. But Han-sol saw everything. The silver thread trembling in the air before him quivered like a dying breath. A soul hovered at its end, pale and translucent, eyes wide with terror as it struggled against the pull of the underworld. "Stop fighting," Han-sol said calmly. His voice carried no warmth, no cruelty, only certainty. "Your time has ended." The soul shook its head violently. "No. Not yet. Please." Its thoughts spilled loud and ugly, soaked in regret and desperation. It reeked of unfinished greed, of fear clinging like rot. Han-sol reached out, fingers brushing the thread. One touch was all it would take. Then a scream echoed from the street behind him. A woman had slipped on the wet pavement, her groceries scattering as she fell. People shouted. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else cursed. The soul before him bolted. Han-sol froze. In that fraction of a second, an eternity to a reaper, he hesitated. He didn't know why. Souls fled all the time. It changed nothing. He would simply catch it again. But the silver thread snapped. Han-sol felt it tear through his grasp like ice through skin. The soul vanished. Silence slammed down around him, thick and suffocating. Han-sol stared at his empty hand. Impossible. The underworld answered immediately. The alley darkened, shadows stretching unnaturally long. The air grew heavy, pressing against his lungs though he did not need to breathe. A voice, ancient, cold, layered with countless echoes, spoke inside his skull. "You have failed your duty, Kim Han-sol." His jaw tightened. It escaped. "There are no accidents. Only negligence." Anger sparked, sharp and bitter. "I have served for centuries without error. And for that, you will be shown mercy." Mercy. Han-sol hated that word. The shadows coiled tighter, wrapping around him like chains. "You will roam the human world as one of them for 100 days. No scythe. No authority. No interference with fate." Han-sol's eyes widened. "You would strip me of my form. You will walk among those you despise. You will observe what you judge. And you will find the soul you lost." A pause. Then. "If you fail, you will remain human forever." The shadows released him. The alley returned to normal, rain, neon lights, human noise. Han-sol staggered, breath hitching painfully as air burned his lungs. His heart, a human heart, thudded loudly in his chest. He clutched his coat, fingers trembling. 100 days, he muttered. For the first time in centuries, time mattered. Living among humans was worse than he imagined. They smiled while their thoughts crawled with envy. They bowed politely while calculating how to take more than they deserved. Their desires leaked from them like poison, lust, greed, resentment, all swirling together until Han-sol felt constantly dirty just by standing near them. On the subway, he had to grip the pole to keep from recoiling. Disgusting, he thought as a man stared openly at a woman's body while pretending to read his phone. You rot yourselves from the inside and call it living. Even children were not innocent. They learned quickly. They always did. Han-sol spent his nights wandering Seoul, eyes scanning crowds for the wrongness of an uncollected soul. He felt weaker with each passing hour, his senses dulled, his body aching in unfamiliar ways. Hunger. Fatigue. Pain. So this was what humans endured every day. How pitiful, he thought bitterly. How tedious. On the morning of the first day, as pale sunlight bled across the Han River, Han's soul felt it. Warmth. Not physical, spiritual. He stopped walking. The sensation brushed against his senses like sunlight through closed eyelids. It wasn't sharp like fear or heavy like regret. It didn't stink of obsession or decay. It was bright. Han's soul turned slowly, heart stuttering for reasons he didn't understand. Across the street, near a small park, a young man sat on a bench with a sketchbook balanced on his knees. His hair was dark, curling softly at the nape of his neck, his posture relaxed despite the early hour. He hummed quietly as his pencil moved, completely absorbed. And his soul. Han's soul's breath caught. It glowed. Not the pale gray of ordinary humans, nor the murky shadows of those near death. It shone like morning sun, warm and steady, untouched by malice. Impossible. No human soul was that clean. The young man looked up. Their eyes met. The warmth flared. For a heartbeat, Han's soul forgot the city, forgot the underworld, forgot his hatred. The young man smiled. "Ah, sorry," he said, voice soft, apologetic. "Was I staring?" Han's soul realized he had stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The word stuck. His throat felt tight. Human. Annoyingly human. No. The young man tilted his head, studying him openly, not with hunger or judgment, but curiosity. "You look tired. Like you haven't slept." Han's soul almost laughed. "If only you knew," he thought. "I'm fine," he replied flatly. The young man smiled again, brighter this time. "I'm Lee Jimin." Han's soul hesitated, then answered, "Kim Han Soul." The name tasted different spoken aloud like this, less like a title, more like a person. Jimin closed his sketchbook. "Nice to meet you, Han Soul." The way he said it, gentle, sincere, sent an unfamiliar ache through Han Soul's chest. As Jimin stood, Han Soul felt it then. A mark. Invisible to human eyes, glowing faintly at the base of Jimin's neck. A countdown. 99 days. Han Soul's stomach dropped. The warmth. The brightness. The impossible purity. This soul was dying. Han's soul watched Jimin walk away, sunlight clinging to him like a blessing. For the first time since his punishment began, hatred loosened its grip. And for the first time in centuries, dread settled deep in Kim Han Soul's bones. Chapter 2, The Boy Who Shines. Han's soul told himself he would not follow Lee Jimin. Reapers did not linger. They observed, collected, and moved on. Attachment was a flaw, one he had carved out of himself long ago. Even now, stripped of his authority, he had no intention of staying near a dying human simply because his soul was different. And yet, Han's soul found himself standing across the street from the small park again the next afternoon. The sky was clear, winter sunlight pale but persistent. Jimin sat on the same bench, sketchbook open, legs crossed casually. A paper cup of coffee steamed beside him, untouched. He wore an oversized sweater, sleeves falling past his wrists, the fabric soft with wear. He looked alive. Too alive for someone with 98 days left. Han's soul leaned against a lamppost, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. He watched Jimin's pencil move, confident lines, gentle curves. Each stroke carried intention, affection. Humans usually drew to be seen. Jimin drew as if the world itself were listening. How strange, Han's soul thought. To love something that will abandon you so soon. Jimin paused, rubbing his wrist, then frowned at the page. That's not right. He tore the page out, crumpled it, then stopped. Instead of throwing it away, he carefully smoothed it out and tucked it into his bag. Han's soul's chest tightened. Even your mistakes, he thought, you keep them. A shadow fell across Jimin's sketchbook. Oh, Jimin looked up, startled, then smiled. It's you. Han Sol stiffened. We met once. Once is still a meeting, Jimin said lightly. He tilted his head. You came back. It wasn't a question. I was passing through, Han Sol replied. Jimin's smile didn't falter. Then pass through here. Sit. He patted the empty space beside him. Han Sol hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. Sitting meant staying. Staying meant watching the countdown tick down. And yet his legs moved on their own. The bench was cold through his coat. Jimin smelled faintly of paint and soap, something clean, uncomplicated. The warmth of his soul brushed against Han Sol's senses like a living thing, gentle but persistent. Jimin closed his sketchbook. You look less angry today. I was not angry. Jimin laughed softly. You were. A little. Like this. He scrunched his eyebrows together, mimicking Han Sol's expression with exaggerated seriousness. Han Sol stared. I do not look like that. You do, Jimin insisted, amused. But it's okay. Some people wear their storms on their faces. Storms. If only he knew. Han Sol glanced at Jimin's neck. 98 days. The numbers glowed faintly, mocking him. You shouldn't sit out here so long, Han Sol said abruptly. It's cold. Jimin blinked, surprised. Then his smile softened. You noticed. I stated a fact. Jimin hugged his coffee cup with both hands. I like the cold. It makes things feel sharper. Like I'm really here. Han Sol swallowed. You are running out of time, he thought. And you don't even know it. What do you draw? Han Sol asked quietly. Jimin brightened. People. Places. Things that feel important. He hesitated, then added, things I don't want to forget. The words struck deeper than they should have. Jimin flipped open his sketchbook and turned it toward him. Pages filled with faces, strangers on buses, elderly couples holding hands, a cat sleeping in sunlight. None were perfect. All were honest. Then Han Sol saw it. A sketch of the alley from last night. Rain-slicked pavement. Flickering neon. A shadowed figure standing alone. Him. Han Sol's breath caught. When did you draw this? Jimin followed his gaze and flushed. Ah, yesterday. I saw you there. You looked lonely. Lonely. The word echoed painfully. I shouldn't have drawn you without asking, Jimin said quickly. I can tear it out if you want. Han Sol shook his head, too fast. No. Jimin studied him carefully. You don't like humans much, do you? Han Sol scoffed before he could stop himself. They lie. Even to themselves. Jimin didn't argue. He simply nodded. Some do. And yet you smile at everyone, Han Sol said. Why? Jimin considered this. Because they're still people. Even when they're ugly inside. He smiled faintly. And sometimes, smiling first makes them softer. Han Sol looked away, jaw tight. You will break, he thought bitterly. The world always breaks people like you. A sudden cough tore through Jimin's body, sharp, violent. He turned away, shoulders shaking. Han Sol instinctively reached out, hand hovering uselessly in the air. Jimin pressed a handkerchief to his mouth. Red bloomed. Han Sol froze. The world narrowed to that single stain. I'm fine, Jimin said quickly when he saw Han Sol's expression. Too quickly. Really? It happens sometimes. You are sick, Han Sol said flatly. Jimin chuckled weakly. That's one way to put it. The numbers pulsed. 97 days. Han Sol's fingers curled into fists. I could walk away, he thought. I should walk away. But when Jimin smiled at him again, gentle, apologetic, still warm despite the blood, Han Sol knew he wouldn't. What do you do, Han Sol? Jimin asked. He faltered. Reapers had no professions. No hobbies. No future. I observe. Jimin's eyes lit up. Then stay. Observe with me. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the park. For a moment, the world felt suspended, balanced between life and death. Han Sol sat beside a boy who shone like the sun. And somewhere deep within him, something ancient and cold began to crack. Chapter 3, Borrowed Time. Han Sol began to measure his days differently. Not by sunrise or sunset, nor by the dull ache in his human body that reminded him he was no longer eternal, but by Lee Jimin's breathing. By the way Jimin's chest rose and fell when he laughed too hard. By the pauses when he climbed stairs. By the coughs he tried, and failed, to hide. They met often after that, though neither of them ever called it a habit. Jimin claimed Han Sol had a quiet presence, like someone who made space simply by existing. Han Sol told himself he stayed because he was watching a dying soul. Nothing more. But observation had never felt like this. They walked along the Han River, winter wind cutting sharp against their faces. Jimin wore a scarf too thin for the season, the ends fluttering as he talked about colors, how the river looked different every day, how sunlight fractured into gold at certain angles. Han Sol listened. He always listened. You don't talk much, Jimin said one afternoon, glancing sideways at him. But you don't feel empty either. What does that mean? Jimin smiled, thoughtful. Some people are quiet because there's nothing inside them. You're quiet like you're full. Han Sol looked away. Full of death, he thought. Full of endings. They stopped at a small convenience store. Jimin bought hot canned coffee and pressed one into Han Sol's hands before he could refuse. Drink it. You're always cold. I am not. Han Sol stopped. The warmth seeped into his palms. His fingers tingled. Cold, he finished weakly. Jimin laughed, delighted. See? Han Sol stared at the steam curling into the air. When did you start noticing things like this? He asked himself. When did warmth become something you wanted to keep? Jimin's apartment was small, cluttered with canvases stacked against the walls. Half-finished paintings leaned in corners like unfinished thoughts. The place smelled faintly of paint thinner and citrus soap. This is my favorite, Jimin said, pointing to a canvas by the window. It was a sunlit field, wildflowers painted in soft, desperate strokes, as if the artist had been afraid they would disappear if he didn't hurry. Han Sol's throat tightened. Why flowers? Because they don't last, Jimin answered simply. But they bloom anyway. The words landed like a blade. Han Sol turned his gaze away, eyes drifting instead to the faint glow at the base of Jimin's neck. 92 days. Too fast. The numbers were falling too fast. That night, Jimin collapsed. It happened quietly. No drama. No warning. One moment he was laughing at a joke Han Sol didn't remember making, the next his knees buckled. Han Sol caught him instinctively, the weight of his body shockingly fragile. Jimin. Han Sol's voice cracked. Sorry, Jimin murmured, dazed. Guess I pushed myself. Han Sol lifted him without thinking. His arms trembled, not from the weight, but from the fear curling violently in his chest. Fear. A Reaper did not fear death. And yet. Jimin's apartment felt colder than before as Han Sol laid him on the bed. Jimin's skin was clammy, his breath shallow. Han Sol knelt beside him, hands hovering uselessly. I could take you now, a cruel, distant part of him whispered. End this gently. No more pain. His fingers curled into the sheets. No. Jimin stirred, eyes fluttering open. You look scary when you frown. Han Sol swallowed. Do not talk. Yes, sir, Jimin teased weakly, then winced as another cough racked his body. Blood bloomed against the pillowcase this time. Han Sol turned away sharply, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I have collected kings, murderers, children, he thought. Why can I not look at this? Hey, Jimin whispered. Han Sol looked back despite himself. Jimin smiled, small, tired, but sincere. You're here. Something inside Han Sol splintered. That night, Han Sol did not leave. He sat beside the bed until dawn, listening to Jimin breathe. Every rasp, every hitch carved itself into his mind like a countdown he could not escape. He tried to reach beyond himself, to feel the underworld, to sense the silver threads of fate. Nothing. He was truly powerless. As the sun rose, pale light spilling across the floor, Jimin stirred again. You stayed. I had nowhere else to be, Han Sol replied. A lie. Jimin smiled anyway. I'm glad. Han Sol stood abruptly, turning toward the window. You must rest. You are, he stopped. Dying. The word burned in his throat. Unwell. Jimin watched him quietly. Han Sol, how much time do you think a person needs to live a good life? Han Sol closed his eyes. An eternity, he thought. And even that is not enough. I do not know, he said instead. Jimin nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. I think, as long as someone remembers you warmly, it's enough. Han Sol felt something wet trail down his cheek. He touched his face, stunned. Tears. Human tears. Jimin's eyes widened. Ah, did I say something wrong? Han Sol shook his head once. No. He turned back, meeting Jimin's gaze fully. You are remembered, Han Sol said quietly. Even now. Jimin smiled, eyes soft. Then I'm doing okay. Han Sol looked again at the glowing numbers. 91 days. Borrowed time. Stolen moments. And for the first time, Han Sol prayed, not to the underworld, not to fate. But to time itself. Slow down. Chapter 4, The Lie of Eternity. Time did not slow. It slipped through Han Sol's fingers no matter how tightly he tried to hold it. Days blurred into one another, hospital visits disguised as checkups, afternoons spent painting in Jimin's apartment, evenings where exhaustion pressed heavier on Jimin's shoulders but he refused to rest until the sun disappeared completely. Han Sol watched it all. He watched Jimin grow thinner, his cheeks hollowing slightly, his hands trembling when he held his brush too long. He watched the light in his soul flicker, not dim, never dim, but strain, like a flame burning too brightly on borrowed oil. 78 days. The number pulsed like a wound. Han Sol began to lie. Not loudly. Not cruelly. He lied softly. You look better today, he said when Jimin's steps dragged. I'll come again tomorrow, he promised, as if tomorrows were infinite. You have time, he said most often. Jimin always smiled at that. You say that a lot, Jimin murmured one evening as they sat on the floor, backs against the couch, sharing takeout they barely touched. The room smelled of oil paint and cold noodles. It sounds like something you want to believe. Han Sol stiffened. It is true. Jimin turned his head to look at him. His eyes were warm, perceptive in a way that felt dangerous. How would you know? Because I see your death written on you. Because I am death. Han Sol looked away. I observe things. Jimin chuckled. You really like saying that. Silence stretched between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, traffic murmured like a distant sea. I'm scared sometimes, Jimin said suddenly. Han Sol's breath caught. Jimin spoke lightly, but his fingers twisted together in his lap. Not of dying. Just, of leaving things unfinished. Han Sol's chest ached. You are unfinished, he thought desperately. You have barely begun. What would you finish? Han Sol asked. Jimin smiled, small and shy. One last painting. Something honest. Something that feels like, goodbye. The word rang too loud in the room. Han Sol stood abruptly. Do not speak like that. Jimin blinked, startled. Like what? As if you are already gone, Han Sol snapped. The silence that followed was sharp. Then Jimin laughed softly. Han Sol, you're strange. Han Sol's hands curled at his sides. You should rest. There you go again, Jimin said gently. Ordering me around. I am trying to keep you alive, Han Sol said before he could stop himself. The words hung between them, raw and exposed. Jimin's smile faded. Alive, he repeated quietly. That's a big promise. Han Sol met his gaze, heart pounding. For a terrifying moment, he considered telling the truth. Everything. The countdown. The underworld. The scythe he no longer carried. Instead. You will be fine, Han Sol said firmly. You are strong. It was the cruelest lie he had ever told. That night, Han Sol did not sleep. He sat on the edge of the roof of Jimin's apartment building, staring into the dark sky. The city glowed below him, alive and uncaring. He reached inward, past the limits forced upon him, past the ache of his human body, and clawed desperately for the underworld. Nothing answered. But he did not stop. He searched forbidden memories, fragments of judgment whispered through centuries. He recalled rare stories, souls spared, fates altered, reapers who broke rules and paid the price. What is one more sin? He thought bitterly. I have already failed. Give me away, he whispered into the night. Take me instead. Take my eternity. Take anything. The wind swallowed his words. 77 days. Han Sol pressed his forehead against his knees, shaking. I am afraid, he realized. Not of punishment. Not of becoming human forever. But of a world where Lee Jimin did not exist. Jimin grew suspicious. It started small, the way Han Sol flinched when Jimin coughed, the way his eyes lingered too long at Jimin's neck, the way he grew tense whenever hospitals were mentioned. You look at me like I'm fragile glass, Jimin said one afternoon. Han Sol froze. I do not. You do, Jimin insisted, smiling sadly. Like if I move too fast, I'll shatter. Han Sol's voice was low. Perhaps you should not move so fast. Jimin reached out, fingers brushing Han Sol's sleeve. The warmth shot straight through him. Tell me the truth, Jimin said softly. Why are you really here? Han Sol swallowed. Because I am waiting for you to die. I like you, Han Sol said instead. The confession slipped out, bare, unguarded. Jimin stared at him. Oh, he breathed. The word held everything, surprise, warmth, fear. Han Sol stepped back as if burned. Forget I said that. Jimin stood slowly, closing the distance between them. I don't think I can. They stood close enough to feel each other's breath. Jimin's eyes searched Han Sol's face, not for answers, but for permission. Han Sol's heart thundered painfully. This is wrong, he thought. This is cruel. And yet. Jimin smiled, soft and uncertain. I like you too. The world tilted. Han Sol reached out, fingers trembling as he brushed Jimin's cheek. The warmth nearly broke him. He leaned his forehead against Jimin's, breath shallow. "This will hurt," Han Sol whispered. Jimin closed his eyes. "Everything does, eventually." Han Sol kissed him. It was gentle. Careful. Like touching something already breaking. As their lips parted, Han Sol pressed his face into Jimin's shoulder, eyes burning. "I will steal every moment I can," he vowed silently. "Even if it damns me." Behind Jimin's neck, unseen. 76 days. The lie of eternity wrapped around them both, fragile and doomed. Chapter 5, The Truth Beneath the Shadow. The truth came to Han Sol like a knife he had always been holding. He simply turned it inward. It happened on the 50th night. Jimin was asleep, curled on his side beneath a thin blanket, lashes casting faint shadows against hollowing cheeks. Moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the room, touching unfinished canvases and drying paint like frozen time. Han Sol stood at the foot of the bed, unable to breathe. 50 days. The number glowed brighter than it ever had before, pulsing with an insistence that made his head ache. "Enough," something ancient whispered inside him. "Stop pretending." Han Sol closed his eyes and did what he had avoided for weeks. He reached inward. Not outward, toward the locked gates of the underworld, but backward. Into memory. Into the echo of the soul he had lost in the alley, the moment the silver thread snapped from his grasp. He let himself remember. The fear. The frantic flight. The warmth. Han Sol's eyes flew open. No. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, the truth aligned. That warmth he had felt that night. That impossibly clean glow. The way the soul had resisted not with greed, but with desperate life. It had not fled to escape death. It had fled because it still wanted to live. Han Sol staggered back a step, the room spinning. "No," he whispered. But the memory sharpened, merciless. The shape of the soul. The echo of its presence. Lee Jimin. Han Sol's knees hit the floor. The punishment. The timing. The cruelty of being forced to walk among humans for 100 days, not to search blindly, but to learn. To feel. To love. This was never about failure. It was about consequence. "You were mine," Han Sol breathed, staring at Jimin's sleeping form. From the beginning. The escaped soul. The dying sun. The boy who smiled at strangers and bloomed anyway. They had always been the same. Han Sol pressed his forehead to the cold floor, hands shaking violently. "I was meant to take you." The realization hollowed him out completely. Jimin woke to the sound of quiet, broken breathing. He sat up slowly, disoriented, then saw Han Sol kneeling by the bed, shoulders trembling, face buried in his hands. "Han Sol." Jimin whispered. Han Sol flinched as if struck. Jimin reached out instinctively, fingers brushing Han Sol's wrist. "What's wrong?" Han Sol looked up. His eyes were red, not from human tears alone, but from something deeper, older. Something breaking at the seams. "I lied to you," Han Sol said hoarsely. Jimin's heart sank. "About what?" "About everything." Jimin swallowed. "Okay. Then tell me now." Han Sol laughed, a sound scraped raw from his chest. "You are not afraid." "I am," Jimin admitted softly. "But not of you." Han Sol closed his eyes. And then he told him. Not gently. Not slowly. He told him the truth the way death always arrived, sudden and unavoidable. He spoke of the underworld. Of reapers and silver threads. Of the alley. Of the soul that escaped. Of the countdown Jimin could not see. When he finished, the room was unbearably silent. Jimin sat very still, blanket clenched in his fists. "So," Jimin said finally, voice trembling despite his effort to steady it. "You're saying, you were supposed to take me before?" Han Sol nodded once. "Yes. And now?" Han Sol's throat tightened. "Now I have 50 days left before I do." Jimin laughed weakly, running a hand through his hair. "That's dramatic." "I am not joking," Han Sol said desperately. "I see it. Every day. I have always seen it." Jimin looked up at him then, eyes shining, not with fear, but hurt. "Is that why you look at me like that?" he asked quietly. "Like you're already mourning?" Han Sol reached for him without thinking, stopping himself just short of contact. "I never wanted you to know. But I deserve to," Jimin said. "Yes," Han Sol whispered. "You do." Jimin took a shaky breath. "So, all this time. Was it real?" The question pierced deeper than any blade. Han Sol crawled closer, voice breaking. "Every moment. Every smile. Every time I lied, it was because I could not bear the truth." Jimin studied his face for a long time. Then he reached out and touched Han Sol's cheek. The warmth nearly destroyed him. "I don't feel like a mistake," Jimin said softly. "I don't feel like a punishment." Han Sol pressed his eyes shut as tears spilled freely. "You are not. This is." Jimin leaned forward, resting his forehead against Han Sol's. "Then don't run. I will hurt you." "You already are," Jimin said gently. "But I'd rather it be with you." Han Sol shook, hands finally coming to rest at Jimin's waist, clinging like a man drowning. "I am death," he whispered. "And I love you." Jimin smiled sadly. "Then love me honestly. For whatever time I have." Later, after the tears, after the silence. Jimin pulled out a fresh canvas. "I think I know what my last painting is," he said. Han Sol watched him paint late into the night, every stroke deliberate, urgent. The image took shape slowly, a shadowed figure standing beneath an overwhelming sun, one hand reaching upward. One reaching down. Han Sol stood behind him, arms wrapped gently around his waist, chin resting on his shoulder. For once, there was no lie between them. Only truth. Only time slipping away. Behind Jimin's neck, unseen but unforgiving. 49 days. And Kim Han Sol knew, with devastating clarity, that loving Lee Jimin was the greatest sin he would ever commit. Chapter 6, Loving a Dying Son. Knowing did not make it easier. If anything, the truth made every moment sharper, each laugh edged with pain, each touch weighted with the knowledge of how soon it would be taken away. Han Sol stopped lying. Not about time. Not about fear. Not about what waited at the end. And Jimin stopped pretending he wasn't tired. They began to live inside the days instead of past them. They moved slower now. Jimin's steps shortened, his breaths came shallow when he laughed too hard. Han Sol learned the exact moment to reach for him, before Jimin's knees buckled, before the world tilted. He learned how to brew tea the way Jimin liked it, learned which pillows eased the ache in his back, learned the quiet signs of pain Jimin never voiced. Han Sol hated how easily he learned. "I was made to remember deaths," he thought bitterly. Not how someone takes their coffee. One afternoon, they sat on the floor of Jimin's apartment, sunlight pooling around them. Canvases surrounded them like silent witnesses. Jimin leaned against Han Sol's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "It's loud," Jimin murmured. Han Sol froze. "I can move." "No," Jimin said quickly, fingers curling into Han Sol's coat. "I like it. It reminds me you're here." Han Sol closed his eyes. "I won't be," he thought. "Not like this." "How many days?" Jimin asked softly. Han Sol stiffened. You said you didn't want to count. I don't, Jimin said. But I want to know where we are. Han Sol swallowed. His voice came out rough. 17. Jimin nodded, absorbing it. 17 is still a lot. It wasn't. They both knew it. On the 15th day before the end, Jimin asked to go out. The park, he said, eyes bright despite the exhaustion etched into his face. Where we met. Han Sol wanted to refuse. The wind was cold. The world was cruel. Time moved too fast outside the safety of these walls. But Jimin smiled at him, the same warm, open smile that had undone him from the start. Please, Jimin said. So they went. The park looked the same and entirely different. Bare trees reached skyward like grasping hands. The bench was still there, worn smooth by time. Jimin sat, resting his head against Han Sol's shoulder. I'm glad it was you, Jimin said quietly. Han Sol's heart clenched. Glad for what? That it was you who found me, Jimin replied. That it was you who stayed. Han Sol turned his face away, eyes burning. I was supposed to end you. Jimin smiled faintly. But you didn't. Yet. Jimin reached for Han Sol's hand, threading their fingers together. His grip was weak, but certain. Han Sol, he said softly. When it's time, don't hesitate. Han Sol stopped walking. Jimin turned to face him fully, expression calm in a way that terrified him. Promise me. I cannot, Han Sol said, voice breaking. I won't. You will, Jimin said gently. Because that's who you are. And because I trust you. Trust. The word shattered him. Han Sol pulled Jimin into his arms, holding him so tightly it hurt. Jimin didn't protest. He simply rested there, breathing him in as if memorizing the shape of him. I love you, Han Sol whispered into Jimin's hair. I love you more than eternity. Jimin smiled against his chest. Then don't make my ending lonely. The final night came too quickly. Jimin lay in bed, pale as moonlight, breaths shallow and uneven. Han Sol sat beside him, hands clasped tightly around Jimin's, as if he could anchor him to the world through touch alone. One day. The number burned. Jimin's eyes fluttered open. You're still here. I will always be here, Han Sol said. A lie. A kinder one, this time. Jimin smiled weakly. Do you remember the painting? The one with the sun, Han Sol said. I finished it, Jimin whispered. I named it. Han Sol leaned closer. What did you call it? Borrowed light. Han Sol's breath hitched. Jimin shifted with effort, lifting a trembling hand to cup Han Sol's cheek. His skin was cold now. Too cold. Don't hate humans anymore, Jimin said softly. Some of us really tried. Han Sol pressed his face into Jimin's palm, tears spilling freely. You were the best of them. Jimin chuckled weakly. That's a lot of pressure. Silence fell, heavy and sacred. Jimin's breathing slowed. Han Sol felt it, the moment approaching, inevitable and merciless. The silver thread shimmered into existence, faint but undeniable. No, Han Sol whispered. Please. The underworld did not answer. Jimin's gaze focused on him one last time. It's okay, he murmured. I'm not scared. Han Sol leaned down, pressing his forehead to Jimin's. I am, he confessed. Jimin smiled. Then remember me brave. His breath left him. And did not return. The room went impossibly still. Han Sol sat frozen, hands still clasped around Jimin's, waiting, foolishly, for warmth to return. It didn't. The silver thread pulsed, bright and insistent. With shaking hands, Han Sol reached out. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice shattered. I love you. He reaped the soul with a gentleness reserved only for the most beloved. Jimin's soul rose, warm, glowing, unchanged. It turned back once, smiling at Han's soul the way it always had. Then it faded into light. Han's soul screamed. Not aloud, but somewhere deep and endless, where eternity fractured beyond repair. And when dawn broke, Kim Han's soul was alone with a body that no longer breathed. And a love that would never die. Chapter 7, When the Sun Sets. The world did not end when Lee Jimin died. That was the cruelest part. Morning arrived anyway. Pale sunlight crept through the curtains, touching the edge of the bed, warming the place where Jimin's hand still lay in Han's soul's grasp. The city woke with its usual indifference, cars passing, people laughing somewhere below, life continuing as if nothing sacred had been lost. Han's soul sat unmoving. He had not released Jimin's hand. The skin beneath his fingers was cooling, losing the last traces of warmth that had defined him. Han's soul pressed his thumb gently against Jimin's knuckles, as if friction might spark life back into him. Breathe, he thought desperately. You forgot to breathe. But Jimin did not. I'm here, Han's soul whispered hoarsely. You can wake up now. Silence answered him. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against Jimin's shoulder. The scent of paint, soap, and something unmistakably Jimin lingered stubbornly, refusing to fade. This is my fault, Han's soul thought. I was given eternity, and I spent it stealing from a boy with only days. A tremor ran through the air. The shadows deepened. Han's soul felt it before he saw it, the slow, inevitable return of power. The weight of death settling back into his bones like a mantle he could never remove. The underworld had come to collect its due. Darkness pooled at the corners of the room, thick and soundless. The silver thread that had once bound Jimin to life shimmered faintly, then dissolved completely. Your punishment is complete. The voice returned, ancient and merciless. Han's soul did not look up. Take it back, he said quietly. It is done. I will trade you centuries, Han's soul whispered. Millennia. Take my name. Take my memory. Just. There are no bargains left. Something snapped inside him then. Han's soul laughed, a broken, hollow sound. Then this was never mercy. The shadows did not argue. They receded slowly, respectfully, leaving him alone once more. Han's soul felt the shift fully then, his senses sharpening, the weight of mortality lifting from his chest. The ache in his body vanished, replaced by the cold clarity of what he had always been. A grim reaper again. He looked down at Jimin's still form. Not again, he thought. I will not be distant. I will not be cruel. With infinite care, Han's soul brushed Jimin's hair back from his forehead. He traced the familiar lines of his face, the curve of his cheek, the soft corner of his mouth that always lifted when he smiled. You were not a punishment, Han's soul murmured. You were my answer. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Jimin's forehead. Then he stood. Jimin's funeral was small. A few friends. A distant relative. People who loved him in fragments, who spoke of his kindness and talent, who wept without knowing the full measure of what had been lost. Han's soul stood at the edge, unseen. Humans passed through him without noticing. Their grief brushed against him, heavy, sincere, flawed. He did not recoil this time. He understood now. When the coffin was lowered into the ground, sunlight broke through the clouds briefly, spilling gold across the earth. Han's soul closed his eyes. You would have liked that, he thought. Centuries passed. Cities changed. Buildings rose and fell. Names were forgotten. But Kim Han's soul remained. He walked Korea endlessly, through crowded streets and quiet villages, through hospitals and homes where death still whispered his name. He performed his duty without failure. Yet he was different now. When he encountered souls steeped in bitterness, he did not despise them. When he guided frightened spirits across the threshold, he did not rush them. Sometimes, when a soul hesitated, bathed in fear and regret, Han's soul would remember a boy with paint-stained fingers and sunlight in his smile. "It's all right," he would say softly. "You lived." On rare mornings, when dawn painted the sky just right, Han's soul would stop walking. For a heartbeat, just one, he would feel warmth. Not enough to hurt. Not enough to heal. Just enough to remember. In a quiet park, long since renovated, a small plaque remained unnoticed by most passers-by. It commemorated a mural that once stood there, painted by a young artist whose work had faded with time. Han's soul stood before it often. He did not need the name engraved to know who it was. "I'm still here," he said to the empty air. "Just like you asked." The wind stirred, gentle and warm. For a moment, only a moment, sunlight brushed his face. Han's soul closed his eyes. And in the endless stretch of eternity, he carried the memory of 99 days. Of a dying sun that taught death how to love.